There's been a lot of confusion about the laws put in place to slow the spread of coronavirus. The fines for ignoring social distancing health orders carry quite a sting, and police haven't been afraid to issue them. But there are also more serious offences which can result in criminal charges and even jail time.
There's already a homicide investigation into the Ruby Princess cruise ship fiasco, and several people have been charged with spitting and coughing on frontline workers. Now lawyers predict a flood of criminal and civil cases with links to coronavirus. Criminal lawyer Manny Conditsis joins us now from Sydney. Good morning to you, Manny. Let's just have a look at some of these legal issues. We've heard of at least one health worker who failed to follow the rules, then finding out that they are coronavirus positive, having infected people. Could they face legal action, even criminal charges?
Yes, they can, and not only civil proceedings, but as you say, there's a real possibility in this very difficult climate that they could face criminal charges. Most people would appreciate that there should be, and there is, a distinction between what has to be proved in a civil case and what has to be proved in a criminal case. And that's fair enough, because the penalties that flow from civil is monetary. The penalty that would flow from a criminal charge, potentially at least, is imprisonment. In a civil case, assuming there's a duty of care, and there certainly would be if you're talking about health workers, and more particularly in relation to health workers working in nursing homes, owing a duty to old, frail and vulnerable residents, then if there's a breach of that duty, then there's a consequence. Assuming the worker is infected and that can be proved, excuse me, and assuming it can be established that the worker knew or ought to have known that he or she was infected themselves, and then passed it on to the resident, then that would lead to a liability. In the criminal sphere, the liability could be quite severe, because potential charges could be as serious as manslaughter or gross or criminal negligence, or in some cases, in extreme cases, even murder, based on what lawyers call reckless indifference to human life.
Yeah, it's such an important message, because everyone has a duty of care here. What I've found staggering is that the incidence of coughing and spitting on police and health workers has been so high that they've had to bring in fines and charges for that specifically. While people are being charged with assault, you've touched on this, Manny, already. What happens if the victim was then to contract coronavirus and become sick or even die?
That's a good question, Matt, and you're quite right. Even before coronavirus, spitting on someone, which of course is a disgusting act, the person would be liable to assault. If they're assaulting a police officer, for example, it could be assault a police officer, which is more serious than a common assault. And there are imprisonment potential penalties for that. An analogy could be drawn here, Matt, between what's happening now and the early days of HIV, when there were many cases, many people brought before the court because they intentionally spat on or spilt blood on other people. And they were subjected to very, very serious criminal charges. Whilst the HIV situation could be, in comparison, regarded as more serious, because potentially, once infected, the consequences are much more serious. Nonetheless, I think there are parallels here. In this situation, where there is spitting on someone, and as a result of that, the other person contracts COVID, then depending on the seriousness of what flows from that, there could be, again, very, very serious charges, leading again to manslaughter, possibly even to murder, again on the basis of this principle that lawyers call reckless indifference to human life. So it's extremely serious.
It is indeed. Let's hope it doesn't come to that and we don't see those charges here in Australia. Manny, thank you very much for talking us through it this morning. Much appreciated.